Hello and welcome. I am live from Pellam's Wasteland, and today I have another episode of Pellam's Wasteland Reads for you all. This time covering two books that I read recently. One of them is a reread, and then a third one that is just from the same author, and I like it a lot, so I'm going to talk about it. The author is William Morris. William Morris was an English. Um, Designer of textiles, among other things. He was also um, a socialist and had this kind of crafting commune idea. This uh, work development that he was instrumental in. The idea that of pushing for craftsmanship as a sort of expression of um, essentially an individual desire to create things, and the idea that the average person deserves to be around beautiful and well crafted things, as opposed to the kind of Dickensian image of the Victorian era at times that has come down to us, that is all about misery and horror and gloom and all of the ways in which the individual is completely uh, worn down by their circumstances without any beauty or artistic expression or anything like that. Um, and all of that is sort of about Morris as a person, but he also was an author, and he wrote a number of books, a number of early fantasies that sort of have, in some ways, become important in part because of the people who read these stories and um, these tales. Some of them are original creations. All of the ones here are William Morris creating these stories, but he was also a translator. He translated a number of tales out of Icelandic and translated Beowulf out of Old English, and a number of these kind of Germanic literary things that have come down from very anciently. But then he was also interested in more recent, like medieval literature, and there's some of that in these, and also wrote kind of his own sort of semi-speculative stories at times, and really a fascinating, very creative figure who unfortunately is not read that much anymore. um, some of his stuff, I think, is has not aged as well, but some of it is really good. House of the Wolfings, I think, is really interesting. There are definitely elements that I think that plenty of readers will respond badly to, but it is also a really interesting kind of early attempt at a fantasy story that has some of these fantastical elements, but also is sort of rooted in a kind of uh, deeper sort of historical presentation of fantasy. It is a story that is sort of maybe set. There are Romans and Germanic barbarians, these peoples from beyond the frontier of Rome, and the struggle is between these Germanic peoples of the Mark. Um, Peoples who live in the Mirkwood, which is a clue into the way that there's a number of things in here that inspired J.R. Tolkien. But these Germanic peoples of the Mirkwood are under assault by an invasion by Roman legions, and must fight them off and all of that. And so it is a grand, rousing story. There are these great battle scenes and all that sort of stuff. And there's also other things that are, I think, uh, conceptually connected to J.R.R. Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings. In particular, William Morris does a thing that I think a lot of people don't like as much in Tolkien, which is characters who speak in prose and then switch into poetry, sometimes reciting something already written. In this case, it is mostly presented as a sort of extemporaneous poetic expression that comes on these characters when they are um, kind of most deeply connected to their sort of intense emotional states, right? That they're able to speak in prose when they are calm, but when they are swept up in this emotional arousal, that they come to speak in poetry instead, which is it's an interesting kind of stylistic detail and all of that. At House of the Wolfings, I had read before, and I liked it quite a bit. Rereading it was a lot of fun. Plenty of things that I had forgotten, and also plenty of things that I had remembered. And I was like, oh, it's fun to revisit these things. Um, Roots of the Mountains is not really a true sequel, but it has some kind of sequelish elements, in that one of the groups in Roots of the Mountains is composed of the descendants of the Wolfings from House of the Wolfings, and it is presented as happening, several centuries later, and so there's this sort of sense of, I guess it's more like a conceptual continuity than a direct sequel. A little bit like there's a couple of stories by an author, Guy Gavriel Kay, that have something like that, where he'll write one book and then another book that is in the same world, but is several hundred years later. So there's no characters shared between the two of them, but they are they possess some kind of subtle connections, and a connection in the world rather than in any individual person or anything like that. And I think that's part of what goes on with Roots of the Mountains. Unfortunately, Roots of the Mountains, I think, is also not as good as House of the Wolfings. House of the Wolfings, I think, is partly it is a fair bit shorter, which helps, and it is much more um, closely connected with this invasion, this martial adventure that is at the core of the story. And there are some other, kind of other threads going through that, but at its core, it is tied together by this war that they're fighting, the Wolfings, and the position of leadership to defend the Mark in the Mirkwood. And Roots of the Mountains has a similar kind of martial adventure that takes a whole lot longer to get into, and is resolved fairly quickly when it's eventually resolved. And a lot of the stuff that I think is fun about the House of the Wolfings um, is not as present in the Roots of the Mountains, and it is much longer and it drags a lot more, um, with a lot of kind of long back and forth between these characters that feels, I think significantly more kind of stagnant, essentially, in the Roots of the Mountains. It feels like that one, to me, um it's just not as good as the House of the Wolfings. But I suppose there are some people who would really, people who really like William Morris, I think, would be into it. So I wouldn't necessarily say don't read it. Just be prepared for a story that is, to me, less compelling, less engaging than the House of the Wolfings. Just quite honestly. And then the third book that I wanted to talk about is Golden Wings and Other Stories, is a collection of tales by William Morris. And I don't know if it is. I mean, I'm sure it's out of print. I just happened to find a used copy at the half price books one time. But I think there are probably other good good sources for a lot of the material in here. Um, but a lot of these stories, I think, are really fun. They're from very early in William Morris's career. And it includes stuff like the Hollow Land that is fascinating and wonderful, and all of these things that are, it seems to me, kind of more deliberately close to kind of medieval literature, where Wolfings and Roots of the Mountains are more the kind of like late Roman Germanic style, and kind of post Roman Dark Ages stuff. But I think that I personally really like the stories in Golden Wings. And it's all early stuff, and you can totally find, I'm sure that there are other modern collections of these stories, but stuff like the Hollow Land that is really fascinating and interesting in a way that I think some of his later stuff almost has lost something of the kind of inventiveness and willingness to experiment in some of the early stuff that I think is really part of why it's so much fun. So I would definitely recommend. I mean, you can all of the William Morris stuff, I'm sure, is in the public domain by now, long since in the public domain. So you can find whatever combination of things you're interested in. But I would definitely recommend those early stories of his, because I think they are really fun. But that is going to be it for me for today. So if you are a William Morris head, or have read any of these, have any opinions on them, anything like that, let me know down below in the comment section. Otherwise, I've been live from Pellam's Wasteland, and I will see you next time. Take care, everybody.